Hello, welcome to my second podcast. The topic of this week have been K-pop and Korean language. So, have you all seen my post about Strictly K-pop and Korean School of Amsterdam? If you haven't checked it, please check it out on my Instagram. So, I always introduce the places where you can experience Korean culture in the Netherlands on my Instagram, and I go deeper into the topic every week on my podcast. So if you find my contents interesting and informational, please subscribe my YouTube channel and follow my Instagram account. So for today, I invited a special guest who is Leiden University Korean Studies student.
Hi, my name is Kelly. I'm 21 years old and currently I'm a second year student at Leiden University. And like Soyeon said, my major is Korea Studies.
So, can you tell me what exactly are you learning at school?
So, of course, we have a Korean language course, but at Leiden University we also have different subjects available. So, we have some mandatory subjects like Korean, but also pre-modern and modern history. And we also have subjects that we can choose. So these subjects have a huge range. They range from culture to history, economy, linguistics, or even classical Chinese. So for example, I study classical Chinese. So by learning the characters and translating very old texts from Confucianism and Taoism, but also just learning the characters, I can really see the origin of Korean words.
So that's actually helping you to learn some Korean words, because I heard from my friends who are studying Korean, because you also have to learn Hanja, because the Korean language is from Chinese letter.
Yes.
Even though you don't know the meaning, if you know Hanja, you can kind of guess what does it mean.
Yes, exactly. So it is very useful if you are reading texts but you don't really know what a word means, but from viewing the whole sentence and from the Hanja you can kind of guess what it means. So right now in the second year we also have a course called Language in Use, and we learn the everyday use of Korean, so we don't speak like a textbook anymore. So we learn Korean from, for example, web dramas or K-dramas or pieces of movies, and learn more about natural speaking, like the natural speaking of Korean, instead of sounding a little bit more like a robot.
Yeah.
So we learn more informal Korean, but we also learn very formal Korean, and we do that by reading Korean news and translating the articles and doing quizzes about them to learn more formal Korean. So we learn more how to use Korean in everyday life instead of only, hi, my name is Kelly, how are you? So
yeah, I feel like it's very important to learn Korean from different ways, like from the K-drama or from the newspaper, because I think in Korea we have a lot of ways to ending the sentence or the word. So you can use informal words like 반말, or formal words 존댓말, or in a newspaper is super formal like 했습니다. We don't really use it in a daily life conversation. So I guess for the people who are learning Korean, the most confusing thing could be when to use informal language and when to use the formal language.
Yes, exactly. So it is important to know all the forms of Korean language, because it's so multidimensional.
Yeah. I think you already have really interesting courses at your school. I also saw we have Korean community in the Netherlands on Facebook. So sometimes I see some posts from Leiden University that they are offering some programs like language exchange program. So, what are some of the other special things about studying Korean in Leiden University?
Well, in the second year, in the second semester, we have an exchange program in Korea, and we'll study at Sogang University for a half year. Although I have to say that from next year we change to 3 months instead of 6 months. But right now with the coronavirus, it's also a little bit uncertain if we'll go or not, but we hope we can still go. But during the exchange, they expect you to be able to learn Korean very quickly because you're surrounded every day by Korean. So we'll get an intensive language learning course that is very difficult. At Sogang University, we're also able to pick a subject that is entirely our own decision. So we can choose anything.
So anything from the courses that the university is offering?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So I hope I can make many Korean friends there.
Yeah, I think especially if you're very active on the school activities, you're gonna make Korean friends very easily. So when I first came to the Netherlands, I also wanted to make some friends. So that's why when I saw the post about language exchange program on Facebook, I just signed up for that, and I was matched with a girl, a Dutch girl studying Korean, of course in Leiden, and like we met every weekend to study together, and I helped her to practice speaking Korean, and she taught me some basic Dutch and helped me to pronounce some difficult pronunciation in Dutch. So like we used to hang out in the Netherlands, but last year she came to Korea for her exchange, so I was able to meet her more often. So we explore the city and we hang out together. So I mean, we met as an exchange, language exchange partner, but I think we became friends.
Yes, exactly. So Leiden had a language exchange program, but also a program where Dutch people and Korean people could gather together every week and speak together. And through the language exchange program, I have met some Korean friends. They're now back in Korea, but I still have contact with them.
Yeah.
So I'm glad I could make a lot of friends through language exchange programs.
I mean, I said I became friends with my language exchange partner, but I can still ask her if I have some question about Dutch. But what I mean by that is just I feel more comfortable when I'm hanging out with her, because like we are just talking about everything, and like since we are interested in Dutch culture and Korean culture, like we are just talking about those kinds of things, and it's just so much fun.
Yes, I think it's very fun to exchange not only languages but also cultures, and having like-minded people around you and interest in your culture and your interest in their culture, and really seeing the real culture. Like, of course, you can go and watch YouTube videos, or you have Google and everything, or Naver, but it is very different to kind of have someone in person really teach you things, or cooking their national food for you, and all kinds of things.
Yeah, that's actually the fun part. I think if you know the culture, it's easier to learn the language. I guess a lot of people are listening this podcast because they are interested in Korean culture and language. Since you're the students of Korean studies, perhaps do you have any tips for the Korean learners?
It is important to make it fun and easy for yourself. Like I said, during our classes, we actually use clips of K-dramas or movies to learn the language. So you have to make it fun for yourself, so you keep being motivated.
Yeah.
But also you could translate songs or dramas or movie without subtitles if you're on that level. And also another thing is that if you have Netflix, there's an extension called language learning where you have subtitles in Korean, and underneath you could also have English subtitles, or you can put them off. And if you don't know a word, you can click on the Korean and you will get the dictionary definition. So it's very helpful. So there are a lot of possibilities to study a language. But
yeah, that kinds of content is gonna be helpful for anyone who are studying Korean. Also, there are some websites for offering free Korean lessons. As far as I know, Talk to Me in Korean is the most popular one.
Oh yes, we also actually use a book of Talk to Me in Korean for the news course that we have. Mm-hmm. So that one is very, very nice, although it is quite difficult. So for a beginner, I don't really recommend it. But if you want some challenge, if you want to challenge yourself and you're a little bit higher, your level is a bit higher, then I do really, 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 really recommend it. And before I started learning at Leiden University, I actually bought Talk to Me in Korean books, and they're very, very easy and nice to follow. So I do really recommend Talk to Me in Korean.
It's not a sponsor for Talk to Me in Korean, but I also know they have a podcast. So from all the different levels, I guess the Talk to Me in Korean, the website is really useful. But I do know there are some applications where you can learn Korean. For instance, an app called Drop. You can learn the vocabulary while playing the game. So it's a really easy and fun way to learn the language. Of course, there is a language exchange application as well. But one thing I recently found out is that a Facebook group, for instance, there is one group called Learn Korean Language, and there are a lot of motivated people to learn Korean. So you can form a study group and just gather with like-minded people and motivate each other to learn the language and study together.
I've seen that. I know a friend of mine that has a WhatsApp group to also have language exchange. So yeah, the Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups are very beneficial.
Yeah, there are multiple ways that you can learn Korean. And of course, if you have any questions about learning Korean or just anything, you can always comment down below and I will respond as much as I can. And thanks again for Kelly to join my podcast.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And also thanks for everyone who are listening my podcast. I will come back next week with another interesting topic. And I will see you next week. Bye bye.